Okay, they want us to simplify the square root of 300 plus the square root of 100 plus the square root of 75. But what's the first problem we run into? If you're asked to add those, why can we not currently add them? Nobody knows? Right, the radicands don't match. You have a radicand of 300, 175. So what do we need to do? Simplify it. Okay, what is the square root of 300 a perfect square? Type it in, see what it says. It is not, which means we have to simplify by factor tree. So what are two numbers that multiply to make 300? 30 and 10. Okay, 30 would then break down into what two numbers? And 10 would break down into, and then 10 would break down into 5 and 2 again over here, and then the 3 would drop, and then this 5 and this 2 would come down. So you do have some pairs, they're just spread out, but that's okay. We have a pair of 2s and a pair of 5s. Even though it looks like it's circled, the only thing really not circled was the 3, so it gets to go back inside the radical, and then out of the one circled, one of each gets killed, one of each gets kicked out, putting what on the outside? 10. So we have now just simplified the square root of 300, and it's 10 root 3. Now we're going to add the square root of 100 to it, which is what? 10. And that's a perfect square, so you're done. And then we're going to add the square root of 75 to that, but it can be simplified because it is not a perfect square. So what do I do first? Anybody? Anybody? Nobody knows factors of 75? 15 and 5. 15 then breaks down into a 3 and 5. 5 is prime. Circle your 5s. Kill one, kick one out, put the 3 back in. And so now the square root of 75 has been simplified to 5 square roots of 3. So now they still don't all match, but two of them at least do. The square root of 3s are the same, so you can add their coefficients. 10 plus 5 is 15 square roots of 3, and then just plus 10, which they put at the beginning. Now, can anybody tell me how I could have got that answer a long time ago? Okay. Okay, that is one option. You could have just typed this in, got the decimal version of it, and then typed in each one of these and saw which one matched. But what I was more thinking of is when I first looked at this and I immediately saw that the square root of 100 was 10 and that these two were not perfect squares, so they were not going to become whole numbers, I pretty much know that it has to have a 10 in it. This one does, but it's part of a radical, and this should not be part of a radical, should it? Because it's a perfect square. So right away, when you see that that's a perfect square and the other ones aren't, you know that it has to be A because it's the only one with just a constant value of 10 in it. Does that make sense? Okay, now we need to finish up the little flip book that we made yesterday in your interactive notebook. So turn to page 31. Okay, and you probably already glued it down. You need one? Okay. Independent variable. Okay, so on the left side is the definition of independent variable, and it is the value in an expression that does not change, okay, because it's independent. It does not depend on anything, okay, so it won't change. It's what determines the other things changing, okay, and then the dependent variable is the value that changes based on the expression. Okay, so let's look at the example of this. A plumber charges a service fee of $50 plus $20 per hour. The cost of the job can be modeled by the equation y equals 20x plus 50. What are the independent and dependent variables? Okay, well, we have two variables in this equation, x and y. Which variable is always the independent variable? Which one is always independent, x or y? X. X is always the independent variable. Okay, in any problem, x is always independent. So that means y is always dependent. Okay, but they want to know specifically, what does the x represent in this equation? If a plumber charges a service fee of $50 plus $20 per hour, wouldn't the $50 be the service fee? And this is $20 per hour. So the x is the hours. Hours are independent. Okay, they're going to work however long it takes to fix it. And then what would y be? If this is $20 per hour plus $50, what do you think the whole thing equals? Wouldn't it be the total cost that you'll pay depending on how many hours are worked? Okay, so the total cost is dependent on the amount of hours that it takes to fix the problem. Okay, so we're now done with that little foldable, and we're going to do some practice in your packet. So you can close up your interactive notebook and turn in your packet to page 7. Okay, on page 7, I want you to go ahead and try 1 through 5 by yourself. I'm going to give you like a minute, maybe 2 max. Think back to yesterday, how we defined these 5 terms, and then match it up with its definition. It says match the vocabulary to the correct definition. Algebraic expression. What is the definition of it? What? E is correct. A number sentence without an equal sign has at least one, that doesn't make sense. It says it has at least 1 2 terms and 1 operation. It probably needs to say has at least 2 terms and 1 operation, but that's just a bad definition because an algebraic expression doesn't even have to be 2 terms. Okay? So has at least 1 term is sufficient. All right, number 2, coefficient. What is the definition for it? C is correct. A number that does not stand by itself, it is the number attached to the variable. Number 3, constant. B, the number that's alone, the one that doesn't have a variable. Number 4, term. A is correct. Each part of an expression separated by an operation is a term. And then number 5, variable. D, a letter that stands for a particular numerical value. All right, identify each part of the algebraic expression as well as the coefficient, constant, or variable. So in that expression, 4x minus 12, 4 is the what? Right, the coefficient. Okay, because it is the number attached to a variable. X is the variable. And 12 is a constant, right? Okay, in the expression a plus 3b, a is a variable. 3 is a, right, coefficient. And b is a variable as well. Number 3, in the expression 6y, 6 is a coefficient. And y is a variable. Okay, now turn over to page 8. Identify the terms, coefficient, variable, exponent, and constant as indicated. Okay, number 1, the expression is just 8. How many terms is that? 1. And then it wants you to list out the terms. Well, there's only one term, and it's 8. Okay, number 2, how many terms is that? It's also just 1. Remember, to be a term, it can be a number or a variable or a number and a variable multiplied together. Okay, so that's still one term because they're multiplied together. So that one term is 12a. All right, number 3, how many terms is that? Correct, because this time they're separated by a subtraction sign. So 7b is the first term, and then the second term is technically a -1, because isn't 7b minus 1 the same thing as 7b plus a -1? So that second term is really a -1. Okay, what about number 4? How many terms is that? Just 1, because that's c times c times c times c. It's all multiplied together, so it's still all just one term. Okay, number 5, how many terms is that? 3. Okay, the first term is 3d squared. The second term is 5d. And the third term is -6. Okay, you go ahead and try 6 through 10 before I do them with you. For number 6, you should have got 2 terms, and then the terms are 9e cubed and -4. For number 7, that is 1 term, and it's s to the 5th. For number 8, that is 4 terms, 2g cubed, 4g squared, -5g, and -3. Number 9 is 3 terms, 2/3 h squared, 5h, and -7. And then number 10 is 3 terms, 6j to the 4th power, 5j squared, and 11. Any questions about those? Okay, now let's go down to the bottom section. They give you an expression and they want you to list out the coefficient, variable, exponent, or constant. So for this expression, what is the coefficient? Right, 2, because it's attached to the variable k. And what is the exponent? Remember, anytime you have a variable and it doesn't have a visible exponent, it's raised to the first power. Anytime you have a variable and there's no visible exponent, it's raised to the first power. Okay, and then the constant for this one is -5. Okay, number 12, what is the coefficient for this expression? Okay, coefficients are always beside a variable, correct? Well, we have a variable m. Doesn't it have an understood coefficient of 1 and an understood exponent of 1? So the coefficient is 1, the variable is m, the exponent is 1, and the constant is 23. Okay, you go ahead and try 13, 14, and 15 before I do them. Grant, have y'all tried those 3? Okay, for number 13, the coefficient is 1, the variable is n, the exponent is 3, the constant is 6. Number 14, 7, p, 2, negative 18. Number 15, you have two coefficients, a 12 and a positive 1, because this one has a positive 1. The variable is just q, and then it's raised to two different exponents. Here it's raised to the second power, and then here it's raised to the first power. And then its constant is negative 2. Now for number 16, I want to go ahead and simplify it. Instead of putting minus 3 squared, can't we just put minus 9 instead? And so now the coefficient is 4 over 5. The variable is r. The exponent is 2. And the constant is 9. Number 17, what is the coefficient? A and negative 3. What is the variable? S. What about the exponent? 2 and 1. And the constant? Negative 1/2. Alright, number 18 is a little bit weird because you technically have a 5 times a negative 1t cubed. Okay, there's an understood negative 1 beside this. So the coefficient of t is actually just the negative 1. Okay, the variable is t. The exponent is 3, and then for this one there is no coefficient, no constant, so it's like plus 0. Alright, number 19, what are the coefficients of this one? Right, 6, 5, and negative 3. What about the variable? U. The exponents? 3, 2, and 1, because this u is raised to the first power, and the constant, right. Then number 20, what are the coefficients? 4 and negative 4. The variable is v. It's raised to the second power the first time, and the first power on this one, and then the constant is 4. Okay, now turn to page 9. Alright, number 1, y equals 250x plus 20 represents Juan's ticket sales for an upcoming school play. If Juan has already sold $20 worth of tickets, what does the 250 represent in the equation? What do you think the 250 represents in this equation? Remember, he's already sold $20 worth of tickets, so this is the money he's already made. What do you think this number means? Right, I heard it a few different ways. The cost per ticket. Okay, it's $2.50 per ticket. Alright, number 2. An ice rink charges a flat rate for renting skates plus a fee for every hour skated. The equation modeling the situation is y equals 1.25x plus 350. What does the 350 represent? The what? It's actually the flat rate to skate. Okay, because it says it charges a flat rate, which would be a one-time fee, so that would be your constant, plus a fee for every hour skated. What is the fee to skate per hour? Right, it's $1.25 per hour to skate, plus $3.50 for the flat rate, and normally that flat rate would be for like the, whatever they're called, ice skates rental. Kind of like bowling, you pay a rate per hour, but then don't you also pay a one-time fee to rent the shoes? Same thing. All right, number 3, Teresa stops in a convenience store to buy several small water bottles and several large water bottles. Her total is $16.93. What, or if the equation 199x plus 349y equals 1693 models her purchase, what do the coefficients represent? Well, what are the coefficients in that equation? Right, 199 is the coefficient of x, 349 is the coefficient of y, and what do you think those coefficients represent? Okay, and so $1.99 would be the cost of the small water bottles, and then $3.49 would be the cost of the large water bottles. All right, number 4. To rent a DVD, a customer must pay a certain amount for the DVD plus an amount for every day that it is late. The situation can be modeled by the equation y equals 0.99x plus 3.99. What does the constant represent in the equation? Well, in that equation, what is the constant? 399, okay, because it's the number that stands alone. It does not have a variable. And what do you think it represents? Right, the cost to rent the DVD. So what do you think that 0.99x represents? Right, it's 99 cents a day is the charge for the late fee, 99 cents per day that it's late. All right, number 5, a car can travel 28 miles per gallon of gas. The equation y equals 28x represents this situation. Okay, so it's 28 miles per gallon of gas. So what does the y represent? Well, it's actually, in this case, we're talking about how far it can travel. It can go 28 miles for every gallon of gas it has in its tank. So y would be the distance that the car will go, and that depends on how much gas is in the tank. All right, number 6. Air Force One can travel 630 miles per hour. The equation y equals 630x represents the situation. What does the variable x represent? Right, x would be hours. So in that case, what would the y represent? Distance. Okay, it will go 630 miles per hour, and then if you inserted how long it's been traveling, you would know how far away it is. Okay, number 7. Marcia needs to buy a large amount of pens and 1 pencil. The purchase amount can be represented by the equation y equals 0.70x plus 0.10. What does the variable x represent? Right, the number of pens she's purchasing. How much is each pen? 70 cents. How much is that 1 pencil that she's going to purchase? 10 cents. Okay, this is what we're going to do for the rest of the time. You're going to have a ticket out the door to review rational and irrational. Okay? All you have to do is classify the following 5 numbers as rational or irrational. Okay? And then write it on the paper.